Guys, welcome to today's Pioneers of Energy Tech Roundtable. It wouldn't be a startup deal if there wasn't some type of technical difficulties. Luckily, we've got some of the smartest folks here, and we still cannot figure out how to solve this. If this is the first of your events here with Forward, I'm your host, founder, and invisible friend, apparently, Matt, founder of Forward, and we're building the local to global climate community to help the doers, the creators, the startups, the investors, the corporates, the researchers, help everybody advance their climate goals and mission together so that we can tackle climate change. Because the only way that we do that is together by aligning goals and incentives. So today we've got an incredible panel of energy CEOs lined up to talk to you guys about some of the unique challenges of building out a company in the energy and electrification space, especially these days. I'm going to give them all a little brief introduction. You'll hopefully at least be able to see them. They're the stars of the show. It's not about us. That's why we're the platform and not the people. And then after that, we'll get into a bit of a roundtable where we discuss everything from the state of energy generation and storage, some of their challenges building companies, what's happening in the space, both from a funding as well as a governmental or kind of traction perspective, and then what the future holds for energy and electrification. If you've got questions, you can post them in the chat here, and we will jump into those. And now, without further ado, just a quick introduction for our presenters. And if you haven't yet, make sure you join the energy meetups that we have, the energy calls every month, forward.vc/energy call. You can find it all here on Circle, as well as our energy and infrastructure groups. Great place to connect with other folks like this and be able to really take whatever you're doing in energy to the next level. Speaking of, we've got our first CEO, Doron Meyer. I'm just a quick introduction. I don't even remember how I met him years ago. He's with StoreDot, an Israeli energy storage company. I'll give him a chance to introduce themselves in a sec. Philip is founder and CEO at Hydrogas. They are doing exactly what it sounds like and helping to create energy from waste in really cool ways, having a ton of traction. Dror is also in Israel with Exion, a company we invested in previously with Forward, and they're doing some groundbreaking stuff on energy storage and the battery tech side of things, some nice breakthroughs, which pairs into Matthias, also from Israel. We have strong connections in Israel, working with Replace Energy to make it easier to build out the renewable energy infrastructure and generation that we need. So it's faster, easier, cheaper, so that folks like you can help you go and charge your EVs and make EVs a reality as opposed to something stuck on the side of the road. And those batteries that you're making, they might be coming from Shakar with Lithium Power, who's trying to develop the next generation of lithium power and batteries. Without further ado, a quick 60, 90-second spiel from each of our panelists where they share a little bit more about their story and how they got here, and then we can get into the roundtable. Sound good?
Great.
Doron, do you wanna go first?
Yeah. So hi, I'm Doron Meyersdorf, CEO and the co-founder of StoreDot, a startup that is now 12 years old out of Israel. We are developing materials and cell design and producing lithium-ion batteries that can charge in minutes as opposed to hours. We are focused on the electric vehicle market. We have a number of strategic investors from this ecosystem, starting from Samsung and TDK, but also BP, British Petroleum, Volvo and Polestar, Daimler, Ola, and VinFast, and some others. So really backed up with a strong by the community. We've raised over 200 million over the years. We are 120 people with R&D in California and in Israel, production in China and Korea, and some business offices in Europe. We've recently presented the Polestar 5 with our battery charging in 10 minutes. We can also charge in 5 minutes, but infrastructure only allows 10 minutes. and we are ready for production and scale up with a number of about 15 car makers that have tested the technology.
Awesome. And speaking of batteries, hand things over to Dror. Quick overview of Exion and what brought you here.
Okay, good evening. I'm Dror, co-founder and CEO of Exion. Exion is based on a completely different electrode material design that was invented in Bar-Ilan University by my partner, Dr. David Malka. Um, we started with the tested material with no battery design. Within 2 years, we have a battery with over 200 watt hour per kilogram, working up to 3C, and stable for 10,000 cycles. With the most important part is about $25 per kilowatt hour of bill of material. We are focusing on the underserved market, which is the renewable and grid storage markets, that is really starving for a solution that will give them a viable business model. We raised our seed round, and we are now raising our A round, and that's about it.
Awesome. And we might as well finish out the Israel triumvirate, so to speak, with Matthias and replace.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to see you again. So I'm Matthias. I'm the founder of Replace. We help solar developers to find the best location to build a project in one click. I was working in the development of renewable energy projects for 4 years, and I saw firsthand how inefficient it is. In fact, I, in one case, lost 18 months in a project, and then I understood that 80% of renewable energy projects fail mainly between 0 and ready to build. So then is when we start to replace, and we have a technology that identifies the best location using data and algorithms for a solar farm to have maximum return of investment and minimum development risk. We started 1.5 years ago, but in that time we already have 6 customers, including some of the biggest energy companies in the world, such as Iberdrola or EDF. We operate in the US, Canada, Spain, and Israel, and I'm really looking forward to share this panel with these great entrepreneurs.
We're excited to have you as well. And guys, don't forget, you will have time later to pitch, share, and get deeper into the details. So let's keep these as real quick, kind of 60-second overviews. Philip, let's hear a little bit more about you and Hydrogas. What brought you here?
Okay, I'm Philip Morkel from Hydrogas Energy in Vancouver. We're a climate clean energy startup focused on solutions to recover methane from water bodies. We target bodies up to ocean scale that are at risk of huge emissions to the atmosphere. My first most urgent project is in Lake Kivu, an African Great Lake between Rwanda and the DRC. Kivu is at a growing risk of a limnic eruption that could emit up to 6 gigatons of carbon to the atmosphere in a day. This event also puts 2 to 5 million people at severe risk of instant death because the cloud is toxic and it will be 200 meters deep around the lake. So we use our patented process technology, which was purposefully developed for Lake Kivu, which beats any other technology available, which is really not fit for purpose as it creates even more danger. So the lake's natural ecosystem does the hard work for us. It captures CO2 from atmosphere, traps it in algae in a biozone, and then accumulates at depth where the dead algae biodigests and produces methane and CO2. But that has got to a point where there's too much. It's starting to develop a severe risk of eruption. And what we need to do is to turn that around, extract those gases, use them and make the lake safe for millennia to come. That's
Awesome.
what
I'm going to cut you off there because we'll get deeper into it, but I want to make sure we've got enough time to address all of the other topics as well for today.
we were
Don't worry,
done.
you'll have more time. Shakar, you got 60 seconds. Let's hear you and lithium power.
Yeah, good evening or good morning, wherever you are. So I'm Chandrasekhar. I'm the co-founder of a startup called Lithion Power. So we are into the smart electric vehicles segment. We design, develop core EV powertrain products. These are technical products like battery management systems, motor controllers, battery chargers. We work with two-wheeler manufacturers, three-wheeler manufacturers, battery manufacturers, and we are a very technical company. We have PhDs, we have filed for patents, we have been granted some, and we work directly with large OEMs and battery manufacturers. Company is into seventh year of operations now. We have raised some pre-Series A funds. We are in the market now trying to raise Series A funds. So this is more for capital expansion. And happy to be here and talk to other fellow entrepreneurs and interested people.
And last but certainly not least, you with GoE, who is trying to revolutionize EV charging infrastructure. You? Everything okay? We might have lost Hugh for a second. We can give him a chance to introduce himself once we get into the topics as well. But I want to step into the roundtable itself. We really want to dive deeper into energy. So, what are the cutting edge trends? Where are we at in terms of storage and generation? What are some of the challenges? I figured, given the panelists and given the community that we've got here today, the most interesting place would definitely be around the latest developments in energy storage. So, storage is far behind generation. A, why is that? And B, what's happening on the storage space? Maybe kick things off, Doron, and then Dror, and anyone else that wants to weigh in.
So I think, definitely batteries, energy storage is the new oil. It's more and more evident that we need storage in different shapes and forms to balance the grid and to charge our vehicles and to run our EVs and to support 5G and whatever applications are there. But the cost is still not where it should be, especially when it comes to lithium ion, especially when we talk about NMC. LFP is more cost effective, but mostly in China. Those that are trying to get it out of China now realize that LFP is built for the Chinese supply chain. If you look at Moro, for example, or even Tesla that is trying to do LFP outside of China. So I think looking at the big picture, the geopolitical situation is such that the Chinese have realized maybe 2 decades ago that batteries or energy storage is a national security effort, and they have placed significant resources, subsidies, researchers, talent, universities, and so forth, focused on that, and they are winning big time. We are producing in China. We have investors from China. Every time we do something in China, it's way better, way cheaper than anything else that we do, let's say, in Korea or in the US or in Europe. So I think the world has come to realize that we need energy storage, but the balance of the supply chain know-how and resources and capital equipment is mostly in Asia and more specifically in China. And this is something that it will take a lot of time and a lot of effort to balance out. One of the reasons for all the startups that you see in Israel and elsewhere in energy storage is trying to get ahead with the technology as opposed to the vast resources that China has already put into that.
What do you think about that, Dror? And what are some of the challenges you have being one of those alternative battery technologies and trying to scale things up
Can you hear
outside?
me?
Yes.
Okay. I just heard a tick, like I was disconnected for a second. So I want to follow up to what Doron said. Definitely, there are different market segments, and definitely energy storage is way underserved. As we have, on one hand, the Chinese completely control the industry. They definitely manufacture and sell for the high prices for the EV market that can pay that, and send the lower capacities and performance cells to the energy storage. This leads to unsustainable prices and very difficult supply chains. B, very difficult business models, as you have to add this capacity on the to the project through the 20 years lifetime of such a project. B, in order to try and balance that, as Doron already said, Europe and US have built tons of gigafactories that try to compete with the Chinese excellent performance in yielding and everything, which is unsuccessful. On the other hand, the Europeans and the Americans already understand that energy independence is key for their survival. So the world is looking for technologies that will release this burden of supply chains and will give them the head start to start manufacturing technologies that are not hinging on materials or batteries built in China. And as such, we can see from our partners like EDF and New Energy Power and OMAT and others that they are really looking for solutions that does not require the supply chains, that are capable of being produced in the Western world. And definitely their price point is much lower than the $60 that is available today and may not sustain for a long time at this price. So the market is really holding the demand because there is no product that can really fit to the challenge. So companies that are building new technologies that will be able to be produced in production lines in the Western world without scarce materials and without relating on very fluctuated supply chains will be the ones leading the energy storage, I would say, revolution and make it practical.
How do we make it practical and balance out the generation and storage side of things? This is a toss-up for any of the panelists. And if you want to go, the rule is just start talking. And if you're talking, that means you got the mic.
Matt, I think one of the issues that needs addressing is to look at where there are other sources of, let's say, baseload energy. I mean, we're used to coal, nuclear, at a stretch, even gas turbine type generation as being baseload suitable. Solar, wind are clearly not, and there's a gap between those. Now, hydropower is one that can play both sides of that game, but hydropower is limited by geography, amongst other things. So really finding other alternatives in between, which I don't think battery without huge investments all over the place can quite fill that gap. It's one of the reasons that I developed this gas production system, because it does provide baseload power, and it at least in the circumstances where we're using it, It's a 24-hour system that you can run up and down depending on what the demand is, and it fills that role at a country scale, in fact, 2 countries in this case. So that is a gap where we look at the cost of energy. If you take the whole levelized cost of power to the end user, batteries remain really expensive. They're obviously a way we've got to go, but we mustn't stop looking for alternate solutions which can help baseload.
I have a few clients that are working on reducing the costs of solar panels. One of my clients has created a cell for solar panels that's, I think, going to be revolutionary. And it's going to reduce the cost exponentially. And so solar energy still is very available. The problem is, of course, is the amount of time, the amount of storage. But I've found that a couple of people have found ways to store an excess storage of energy with solar panels. Yes, they're finding ways to manufacture it away from China, and there is ways to do it. Of course, it costs investment money, which is what I'm trying to help them with. I think that's a key area. Now, there's battery power. I have another client who has created battery storage facilities, which I think is brilliant, because the problem with cars, EV cars, is it can only go a certain period of time, and then you've got to recharge. How long does that recharging take, et cetera, right? And how long can you go? That's been always sort of that nemesis in the EV industry. So people are...
Agreed. We're going to get to some questions as well at the end, but I want to make sure we've got enough time to address everything. Sorry, Davina. If you've got questions, can you post them in the chat itself?
Yeah.
And then we will get as many of those as we can at the end. But there were some other topics we want to cover, and otherwise, if we have too many people on here hopping in, we aren't going to get any further along. So we've been talking a bit about some of the geopolitical situation between mostly between the U.S., China, and Europe. Where do we see the most energy generation projects and the most progress when it comes to renewables, energy generation, and really anything other than coal and oil? I would throw this one to Matthias first.
I was about to unlock my mic because, in fact, I was doing a research on that. First of all, regarding that topic, I'm reading an amazing book called The New Map. It's not a spoiler. I don't remember the name of the author, but I really recommend it. But regarding your point, in 2023, China built around 1 gigawatt of renewables. After China, US around 31. Okay. And after that, the rest of the world, like India, like 20, and Spain, like 8, just to put in perspective on renewable energy. So regarding what Doron said, it makes total sense. But yeah, also he was saying that the batteries, and also I will add renewables, is the new oil. So it means geopolitics. So yeah, that's why the US built inside the IRA, the Independence Reduction Act, huge grants to promote batteries, solar, and other renewables, not only to be developed, but also to be manufactured outside at least China, and hopefully for them in the US. So yeah, those are some numbers, and it validates what here people was discussing.
And Chandrasekhar, what are you seeing in India being one of the kind of top production locations outside of China? Are you seeing major pickups now with demand from foreign buyers, foreign corporations?
Yes, that is true. But till now, or maybe till a couple of years back, it was mostly dominated by the Chinese supply chain, right? So all the products, for example, the solar industry, bulk, even I would say that more than 95% of the panels were made from China and imported from China. Of course, over a period of time, because of the government's intervention, the government did come up with the subsidies and production linked incentives to facilitate this industry. So the production increased dramatically in the domestic sector. and it so became that we could export it to other countries. But one has to be pragmatic. You cannot wish away the Chinese dominance, as in they are a manufacturing powerhouse. They do huge amounts of R&D, and they have good supply chain, right? As in, and it is very commercially viable. So if you look at any large scale implementation, people want to have reliability, good quality of the underlying products, and and reasonable commercials. And all these things, if you want to do it, it takes immense amount of time and efforts to get this set up. For example, to create a alternative supply chain requires immense amount of patience. You have to build specific vendors, partners for specific parts of your ecosystem. So it takes time. And yes, one could say that you could try to build alternatives to China, but it requires a lot of support. So, one pragmatic question could be: is it easier to build better relationships with China, or to look for other alternatives and look at it at a economical lens?
What do the rest of the panelists think? Not whether or not it's easier, but what is more likely? What is the future of the energy ecosystem and infrastructure look like? Does it become more hyper localized, or are we going back toward a more globalized world? Would
So
love
I
to.
would take a step first. So, at least in India, we are looking at more usage of renewables. The government is also supporting, and it is not just solar. Okay, so there are other sources of renewable energy also being supported, although not at a scale at which one would assume. Right, India is always a power-hungry country, so the needs are immense. But slowly, the percentage of renewable energy sources is increasing.
Well, my view is that this whole alternative energy became very politicized. And especially if you are looking at what's happening in the US with the elections and with I would say, the risk of sustaining the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, with the tens of billions of dollars that are supposed to go into renewable energy. Nobody really knows if Trump's going to be elected. Will this be kept alive? I just saw some research today, actually more like a questionnaire that people answered, a survey that if you're a Republican, you want to keep producing oil, and if you're a Democrat, you want renewable energy. So really, it will at the end of the day, everybody will see if there are sufficient budgets, because this cannot happen by the private sector on its own. It has to come like it happened in China with a lot of push from the government, and we are talking many billions that need to go into this infrastructure of alternative energy.
And Hugh, I want to move things over to you now, coming at it from a U.S. perspective. What do you see happening there with infrastructure as well as with the overall EV infrastructure and transition? And what do you think? Any predictions? It looks like Hugh is still having trouble, so we are going to keep things more.
May I jump in for a second?
Yeah, go for it.
If the view is, if he's here, let it go. Please.
My name is Terry O'Malley, and I'm in the U.S. I'm in Texas. And when we pump a few gallons of gas and spread around some good CH4 flared gas. But the issue, I think everybody's kind of moving away from the real issue is that there's too much demand and not enough space on the line for transmission. And one of our goals because one of our sciences is that we have a patent for is in conversion, organic conversion. And so I think if there should be a two-pronged program. One is if you have availability of gas, flared gas or whatever, or contained air, why aren't you using it to co-generate your facility and get off the grid and give the grid some space for other people to get on until they start to increase the kilovolt capacity that these lines are running on, 345, 545, even 750 and up. But the point about it is that it's really a point where, for us, we generate so much waste in the world, and half of it's being buried, and it doesn't have to be, because we can convert every bit of it. The other side is getting the bigger players in the United States, because here you can invest in waste management and create an IPO and make money on the stock market, but there's not a lot of the big accounting firms, the big banks and stuff like this, the big financial institutions, hedge funds, things like that want to invest in now converting that waste stream into a resource stream, which that we've been in that testing mad in that position since 2003. And so we know it works. The idea is, too, you can't get anybody to wrap their arms around the idea the waste stream never goes away. And so you have a continuous feedstock stream. And now with the technology conversions and AI and everything about getting data immediately and converting that data into mechanical data so that the computers can mechanically learn and adjust to the different things and variants and variables that are created with a variable waste stream. Why they're not involved, instead of, it's like going to Las Vegas. You want to bet on, red or black, go in the crap table. You got a 50-50 chance of losing or winning. So, and another thing too is the Republicans aren't, and I'm Republican, so I might as well throw that out there. We're not just interested in spending money. We're interested in spending money and getting money back to the communities that we're involved with, and the commerciality of trying to get a better or a greater sense of feedstock that we don't have to keep drilling in the ground. It's the same thing with graphite. We've got plenty of graphite above ground, but everybody wants to create a mine, take 7 to 15 years to get it online. It's got a short EOL, but everything now seems to be directed toward getting companies going, getting stock sold, and then what do they do with the money? It stays in R&D.
Let me jump in now. So with that, I would love to pass things over to Philip with Hydrogas to talk a little bit more about not just your solution, but what other solutions you see as well out there that are dealing with waste stream or kind of latent potential energy sources, and how we can do a better job of utilizing some of those rather than looking for new solutions.
You mean hydroelectric?
No. Hydrogas is strictly talking about resources in water bodies, and that's up to ocean scale, etc. And this is a long reach project, because it's going to be part of the future that we've got to look at. One of the things people don't really know is that half the methane on the planet is not underground, it's in water. It's associated with methane hydrates, permafrost, buried permafrost, and then probably every little lake that you see around the countryside, etc., has got a generation of methane from sludge at the bottom of lakes. Now, some of these are viable, some are not. Certainly when you go to oceanic scale, there are huge resources available, mainly in the form of methane hydrates. The equivalent amount of energy probably exceeds what we've got left in oil, gas, and coal on the planet. So it is a big number, it's huge. The question is methodology to get it out. There's been quite a lot of research entities such as the USGS obviously in the US that are looking at this, but they have generally failed to find a method that works. Try to use oil rigs to drill down into hydrate water bodies at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. The Japanese government has done the same off Japan. But there are accumulations of methane, just say off the west coast, in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, which could supply huge quantities of energy to the US, etc. And it is relatively clean. And I say clean from this respect. People react badly to methane. The thing is with methane, it's there. It can come out into the atmosphere. And there's one solution a hell of a lot better than just leaving it there and allowing it to come out, and that is to find a way to capture it, especially those at risk of emission, capture it and use it in the energy cycle.
Why has there not been more focus on this to date, as well as other potential energy reserves?
Frankly, two reasons. One of which is it's tough to get at, and technologies are not well known to do this. Now, in the instance that I work in, which just happens to be a Great Lake in Africa, it's got not only the conditions which allow for it to be processed. It needed a new technology, which we did develop and test, which is great. It really works. But you also need to be able to do it economically. In that case, it is economic. And on top of that, you've got the potential of earning greenhouse gas credits when doing this. Now, just that's one project, or it'll be a series of actual projects in Lake Kivu. If it wasn't for the, what do you call that, the additionality thing, we could probably earn $600 billion out of that over 50 years. It's that big in terms of greenhouse gas savings, about 6 gigatons of greenhouse gas emissions reduction potential. So those are carbon emission reduction credits. So you will
challenges as well with the space is business models that are based around carbon emission reductions.
But this isn't. That's the point. The additionality clause says that, well, you can make profit out of that anyway. You don't need credits. So that's an argument we can work on, but what we need is credits to get it going, to get it established, etc. That's a good pathway. But when you come to other water bodies, such as the oceans, you've got the whole, let's say the Arctic Circle, all of the ocean, Arctic Ocean has spectacular amounts of methane trapped in permafrost. And as the Arctic warms, and it's warming faster than any other part of the ocean and the atmosphere, that is where I think the quantities reported are about 10 to 15,000 gigatons of methane in permafrost. Now, the technology to get that out is like what I do in Lake Kivu, but a little bit more complicated because you've got to blanket an area to trap the gas and enrich the gas in water and then take it out from there. So we have a concept designed for that too, and it looks really interesting.
So I want to we can talk about some other topics as well. I appreciate it.
I just wanted to say, Matt, that the quantities of energy available in that pretty much rival all of what we can get out of coal, oil, and terrestrial gas.
And that was the next question I had, is on the funding side of things, both from a VC funding as well as a grant funding perspective. We'd love to get the opinions specifically from StoreDot and Replace Energy on the differences between funding for hardware and deep tech versus funding for software and scalability. Do you want to go first, as you've raised a fair bit of money, Doron?
Sure. So I think, the general sentiment in the market right now is really tough for fundraising. And it's a combination, it's like a perfect storm of, everybody is, like we said, waiting for the election, waiting for the interest to come down, some clarity on the future of electric vehicles, which is more specific to us. That right now, there's some reduction, I would say, in the rate of adoption of electric vehicles, plus all the geopolitical issues between China and the US, and a number of failures in the West to kind of ramp up battery technologies. If you look at the Northvolt or even ACC and some other big ambitious gigafactories in the West that have not materialized. All this is creating, I'd say, some fear and concern among the VC community. So we need those that are more, I'd say, visionary and believe in the cause and believe in the future of electrification and batteries and alternative energy to jump in and invest. So it's been really tough recently for raising funds.
And from the software side of things,
Yeah,
around
so maybe just to put in perspective and in amounts and so on, like we raised only a first round until now around a little bit less than $600,000, and with that, our product is working with 6 customers, as I was saying. So software is in some terms another game, and that's also because it's another game. You can also go to generalist VCs, but these VCs then compare you to a cybersecurity company or another SaaS, and we need to be able to show them how big is the market with everything everyone just mentioned. But on top of that, I want to say something that is not always on the discussion, and this is that talent, like the best people, want to work on something that makes an impact. I mean, this is what I'm doing it, and most of the people here are doing it. So this is not linear, but in climate tech and in energy tech, we can get the best talent, not only because we can pay well, but because of people want to make an impact. And this, in terms of return of investment, is huge because the result of a good company is the people. And this is something that makes a lot of sense for me. But yeah, on the software side, you end up, unless you go to a climate tech VC that wants to invest in a very deep hardware and then you compete with Doron or Dror and it's impossible to beat them, you can go also to generalist VCs, and then you need to validate that you can compete with a cybersecurity or SaaS company. So at the end of the story, what we are building is that, like a SaaS in the climate tech space, and maybe that is differentiation. The good thing is that you sometimes can get a middle point where you can like fit the thesis of both climate tech funds and generalist funds, and that can be very interesting for software companies.
And what about when it comes to India, where the VC landscape is a little bit different? Can you clue us in on other parts outside of the kind of traditional VC bubble, Chandra Sakar?
Yeah, so in general, it's more difficult for hardware companies to raise money primarily because of two things. One is the product development life cycle is fairly long compared to a software only product or a SaaS product, where it is a very quick market launch. You can do it very quickly. But in hardware, you have to do multiple iterations, test it out, etc., etc. And second is the initial capital expense required to set up anything on the hardware front. Even if you're not doing the manufacturing or production yourselves, you still have to set up the supply chain. It takes a lot of time and resources. So in general, hardware companies have a difficult time raising capital from standard VCs, the broad-based VCs. Yes, if there is a climate tech VC or a VC which understands the hardware aspects, um, it's easier. But in general, the software-only companies, it's easier because you can do it very quickly. You can turn it around. But the good thing is, once you have hit the market, okay, it is very easy to change or check out a existing hardware product and replace it with some other, because there will be a lot of integrations required with other subsystems. There will be some embedded part. There will be these. There will be lots of things. It is not as easy to remove software. So hardware gets way more integrated and embedded. So once you have got pilot acceptance, you have got pilot customers, enterprise customers, when we have got bunch of paying customers, then it is easier. But the first check that you pick, it takes longer for a hardware company. That has been my experience. So far we have raised about $1 million, and it took a lot of time, longer than expected for us.
And what, Dror, what
May
do
I
you
jump
mean?
in for a second?
Yeah, go for it.
As somebody who raised money for software and hardware companies in the past, and now for a chemical product company, I must say that every time you are in a certain business, the other business looks like easier to fund. But finally, there are waves in the market, and as Doron described, we are in the low beat of the wave at the moment. It is hard to raise money. You have to tune your business model. You have to see how you bring results, or you can commit for results with the minimum amount of money, and show investors that the company is less kind of cash intensive. And you have to think out of the box how to refine your models in order to get closer to the money. And definitely, if you have a very specific problem that people are interested in solving and can foresee that it is solvable in the near future, you are better off to close your funding.
And how does that tie in with governmental grants and tax credits? I know Israel's got an incredible system. We've also got a war, which complicates things. But how does that play in? When does governmental grants and tax credits really come into play? And how are you thinking about building out the future of Exion in terms of where, why, when?
I'll tell you this. In Israel, even the government grants have changed shapes recently, and they even help companies that succeed to raise money with follow-on grants in proportion to the raised amounts. There are different programs specifically in Israel that are trying to align with the market conditions, select the successful companies and have them strive forward. It is not the amounts that you could raise in the past with the older programs. You have to bring more cash from home in order to finance the program. But it's a great help and dedication of the government in order to sustain the technology companies. In terms of Exion, we definitely plan to use dilutive funding plus non-dilutive funding from the government, and jump into European funding the moment we have initial pre-production, in order to go for field pilots in Europe.
And Philip, what challenges do you have for funding, being that you are operating in a developing country where the infrastructure for investment is nowhere near as built out?
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
No easy way to get venture capital finance for what I do. The fact that it's in Africa, or at least the first project's in Africa, they spread around from there. And the fact that it's new technology is almost a death spiral for any venture capitalist's intervention there. We have to look at impact investors. We have to look at government investment. And again, the governments we're talking to in Africa simply don't have the funds to do anything about it. So then you get into DFIs, development finance institutions, and it's always very hard to get their attention. They have their favorites go-to companies, and it's hard to break into that. So generally speaking, we got to either find a sort of philanthropic investor that's prepared to look at the problems. I mean, one of the things that doesn't appear on many, let's say, investment stories is that you can save 6 million lives by doing it that could just disappear in a day. I mean, that is the sort of real characteristic risk of why we're doing this project. It's primarily to save those 6 million lives that could disappear overnight, anytime in the next few decades. The second thing is the greenhouse gas side of things, where we could eliminate a US or China-sized annual emission of greenhouse gases, which in this case would occur in a single day. That too, just, I guess people look at it and say, can't be, it's not real. But it is very real, as are the potential deaths. So it's hard to raise finance on those things unless you're talking to DFIs and governments, and just getting a seat at the table with them is a tough ask.
Why aren't you going to China? Because they're investing so much in Africa. It seems like it would be an easy win for them with the infrastructure.
Again, lack of contacts there. I probably would go to China in the absence of anybody else. I think they would be essentially a good partner for that sort of thing, depending, of course, on the type of agreement that we would reach, etc. I don't know if there are philanthropic institutions in China or whatever, but this project does generate, especially if supplemented with carbon credits, it does generate market returns. What I'm aiming to do with this is not a get-rich-quick scheme for me. This is a scheme where I would actually rather give the money back and reinvest it in those countries. It's their resource. I'm not looking for wealth out of this. And I don't want to get into it with, let's say, venture capitalists, not that they would, but doing it for taking money out of the country, like much of my competition is there. I want this as a developmental project where, yes, we do well out of it, but the country does extremely well out of it. And it's a community-based resource, and we want to give back to that community. And we can do that to the extent of tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars over time. And I think in other opportunities, if we take the Black Sea in Eastern Europe, there's a real need there that is accentuated by the Ukraine-Russia war that's going on. And the Black Sea has far greater resources, perhaps 100 to 500 times larger than what we're looking at here. But again, if you add country risk and so on to the barriers you're working against to get financing to develop that project, where we've already got a concept plan going, we need to take it further. It's tough to get there. And then the final barrier is you talk about the Arctic. Trying to get into the Arctic is a very, very expensive proposition, perhaps 100 times more expensive than these other two. And you need to get into that, and who's going to sort of front up the money there? We see it as a case of going from the easier targets, developing the funding for the next target out of each of those, and do it iteratively. I'm not young enough to be able to do all of those, but at least we can create the system that does that over perhaps the next 20 to 30 years.
And I want to be respectful of everybody's time, because we did technically set this as an hour session. It was probably should have been longer, but for people that do or have kind of hard commits, I have one last question for all of the panelists before then asking them to post their info here in the chat, where you can find them all as well on the platform. But my question is something, let's say you were starting your company again today, or you had to reincorporate your company somewhere else. Where would you go and why? We'll start things with Shakar. You had some of the least amount of time to talk. Where would you, if you had a magic wand, launch your company, and why?
I still do it in India. As you know, we have been creating technology from scratch in India for India, and then providing it to other parts of the world. So for me, wouldn't want to change a thing.
Well, if I'm next, I would go to Sweden. There's a lot of appetite for technology, support from the government, and also our customers like Volvo and Polestar are there, and they are very helpful. So it would have been much easier to ramp up production in Sweden.
And it's much harder to have your batteries overheat in Sweden than it is in Israel, I assume.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So, Dror, speaking of overheating Israeli batteries, you guys don't have that problem. But where would you go if you had to go somewhere else, and why?
I would definitely go to the US, and we're still planning to leapfrog to the US with some of the operation, because talking about funding and non-dilutive funding, you can find it much bigger and easier in the US. Plus, we have several strategic partners, which are Americans, and producing batteries and putting them to operation in the same continent is much easier than producing them in one part of the world and shipping them out.
Let's wait for the elections. Let's see what you answer then.
That's I wanted to say to you also, because now you have customers. When you pulled out the company, you didn't have customers, so you didn't know where the customers would be.
It's true.
Mm-hmm. And
Maybe I can.
go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, because it's related to Dror. But in fact, I'm from Argentina, and I moved to Israel with the goal of building a climate tech company. Like, this was my primary motivation, and I think it was a great choice. Access to capital, talent, access to the markets. No doubt I would do it again. However, for step 2 of the company, I may offer Dror to be roommates in San Francisco. Eh, so let's see, like, and it's ready to where your customers are. So start in Israel, grow in US.
Pro tip as an ex-American, if you want all the perks of the US with few of the cons, try Toronto or Vancouver. And they have much easier startup visa programs for our founders out there. Last but certainly not least, Philip, if you were gonna start things over again today or have to move your company, where would you move it to and why?
I actually did, in a way, it was an indirect thing, but I moved from Africa to Canada to be able to do this, to get into the environment. What I do find in Canada is government funding is very hard to get, and they've got hundreds of barriers to get it. Funding in the US would be a lot easier. I think if I was a dual citizenship between Canada and the US, which is not impossible, I would probably get the best of both worlds.
Best of both worlds. I apologize for anyone that had questions. We're running a bit long. If our panelists want to stick around, they're absolutely welcome to, and we can jump into some short member Q&As. Or if you have to hop and you've got another call planned, be sure to download the Circle app so you get notifications for when our next events are coming. Make sure you update your profile, join the new member calls to get a bit of an overview of the platform itself, and start connecting. Forward, it's LinkedIn plus Meetup plus Tinder for climate sustainability folks. So the startups, the corporates, the governments, the investors, the researchers, the institutions, the folks who should meet but otherwise never would because they're all over the world, just like each of your pictures. So you can meet the folks that you should but otherwise never would and build the things you otherwise never could. We've got 1,700 now meetups in 45 cities, monthly events happening for nearly every sector, and a lot of networking and connections happening on the platform. So start getting active there. It's the best place for you to find the best people so that you can advance your climate goals together. If we've got any questions now would be the time for that. And you can jump in, unmute yourself, and ask a question. If your panelist is still here, you're lucky, and if not, you're stuck with my answers.
I'll have to drop. Sorry.
Me too. I'm sorry, but happy to connect with the forward community.
And And all of our panelists are here in the platform as well. So if you want to reach out to them and send them a message, it's probably the easiest way to do it. Maybe we just wrap things up and call it. Roy, you had a question?
Yeah, just one for Philip, because my background is offshore oil and gas, and I know quite a bit about hydrates. And the trouble usually with getting them out is it takes more energy to get them out almost than you get in return. That's been the trouble with them trying to do it in terms of commercially.
Yeah, I would agree with that being the problem, and I think you're dealing with a situation of how do you go after it, and I think the biggest problem thus far experienced in both Japan and the US in the Gulf of Mexico, Japan off the coast in the Nankai Trough region, is they have taken an oil rig and tried to do the job. And the oil rig by itself is an extremely expensive way of doing things. It is high energy input, and it, just because of the way it works, it actually has a fairly rapid path to failure of the system to yield much. So I think that's where the problem lies. The technology that I use may not work as easily with hydrates as it does with, say, permafrost methane or methane in situ. And for that reason, the actual working costs of what I put in there is so low. We talk about a few kilowatt hours, a few kilowatts of energy in for megawatts out. So as in tens of megawatts out. So that is a completely different construct, which means your energy in, your capital cost to put it in place and work it. You got about 100-to-1 ratio between costs in versus benefits out. It's even higher than that in some instances if you get carbon credits. So for that reason, it's the technology approach that's the bigger problem. And
how
yes,
would you get carbon credits?
Oil and gas is a problem.
Methane? Is it not the same? Isn't it the same as pulling methane out of a reservoir? So how do you end up with fossil credits? I mean, it's entrapped methane that's not. Yes, it may not be in coal or in the underground, but it's still in the form that it's in. It's inert. If you release it, it's no longer inert.
We've examined that, the whole premise of that. We've had it evaluated for a methodology, and the methodology is good. The difference is we are not going after methane in situ that is not at risk of emission. So maybe in the future we go into zones such as hydrates, etc. Hydrates are generally not at risk of emission. But this lake in Africa is at very serious risk of emission. And a one-day event that releases 6 gigatons of GHGs to atmosphere is a very real threat for the next 20, 30, 40 years that it could happen. And it's triggered by a volcano, and there's 2 live volcanoes on the edge of the lake. So it's real, and because of that, what you're doing is you're taking it out, so it's an emission reduction credit, as opposed to a more standardized credit. And for that reason, because you're preventing a major emission direct to atmosphere, you do get credits.
Okay, but in that lake, that's not a hydrate issue. That's just entrapped gas, correct?
That is just a layered lake, which has got a bottom 2 layers out of 5 layers, which have got these gigatons of gas embedded in it. And it's biogenically sourced. So you're not talking about fossil gas. This is biogenic gas too. It doesn't change the argument. The argument is about emissions credits.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, and for the same reason, permafrost in the Arctic is becoming at risk of emission. And what we're not doing is targeting stuff that's stable and will stay there for millennia. We're talking about stuff that is at risk of emission in the next decades or century.
Any last questions, folks?
Yeah. Am I still? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Barely, Terry.
Okay. Yeah. So the host is the water, and you're taking the methane, the gases, out of the water. So you really you're extracting the water first, and then capturing and isolating the the methane, CH4, whatever you want to call it. Is that correct?
That's correct. What we do is we don't pump anything out. What we do is cycle it from deep level to shallow level within the lake or the other water body. And during that cycle, you get gas coming out. What we do is accelerate the degassing process by about 5,000 times normal. And in doing that, you get gas lift. That circulates it. And as it lifts toward the surface, you're extracting the gases, and then you return that water back down to the bottom. It never comes out the surface of the water body. So it's a closed cycle circulation, and all the pumping energy required is provided by gas lift.
So basically, you're co-generated by the feedstock is the gas that you're extracting after you capture it.
Well, the lakes in most instances are generating the gas continuously anyway, and it's that continuous generation that's causing the problem. It's getting closer and closer to saturation, and at saturation or before, if there's a volcanic eruption spilling into the lake, then it blows up and releases it all in a day.
How are you containerizing the CH4? After you've extracted it from the water and cycle the water back in?
No, we produce it continuously, pipe it to shore, and then use it for power generation or cooking gas or as a feedstock gas, depending on what.
That's what I thought. Okay. All right. I sent you a text, by the way. You want to look up Green Bond Fund.
Yes. Thanks, Terry. I've actually had that from somebody else as well.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, bonds are probably the way to go there.
Just to cover that point, Roy, I spent much of my career in oil and gas too, so I'm not talking as somebody inexperienced in that space.
Didn't sound like you were. I'm just curious. My area is offshore oil and gas, so anytime you start getting wet, whether it's ocean or lake, that's what I did.
Yeah.
Not a bad tagline. Guys, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this first Pioneers of Energy CEO Roundtable. We have another one coming up with Champions for Circularity and some other great sessions. So we've got our monthly sector networking and info sessions for everything from transportation to infrastructure to energy, food and ag, built world, and then session coming up on climate grants and how to win those as a startup, and a couple of other interesting ones, ecosystem building. So be sure to go through our online events, RSVP to any of the ones that you find interesting, and add them to your calendar, because otherwise you, like me, will forget the events and forget to show up. So we would love to see you guys on the platform. Make sure to say hi and that you've posted your new member intro and reached out to some of the best people here. It's like LinkedIn. LinkedIn, you don't want people reaching out. We are LinkedIn plus Meetup, because you go to a meetup, you go to a conference or an event to meet awesome people, and you'd regret it if you don't. Well, everyone else here is here to meet awesome people in climate and sustainability. Reach out. They'll be thankful you did, and you'll be thankful as well. Thanks, everybody, for taking the time. And this is Forward signing out.